Today, we're going to be talking about habitual behavior, and this is defined as the action or behaviors that have become automatic and routine over time, often recurring without any conscious thought. And these behaviors are typically acquired through repetition and reinforcement, leading to a very strong association between a specific context, and usually that's called a cue, and the behavior itself. In psychological terms, we usually center around habit formation, and this emphasizes the development of learned associations between a cue and a specific behavior. Habits are usually very, very closely linked to a cue response reward loop. The cue is the trigger that initiates a behavior. The behavior itself is the response, and of course, it is rewarded, which then reinforces the likelihood of repeating that behavior in the future. Over time, habits can become less effortful, and we perform them quite easily, and they can even become unconscious, and then they become deeply ingrained in our neural pathways, making them extremely resistant to change. And by the way, they also become independent of reward or cost assessment, so we don't really look at what the reward is in the future or the cost. We just simply execute the loop, that response-reward loop. Research has shown that habits can be formed in as little as 18 days or as long as 254 days. That depends on the complexity and, of course, the frequency. If we do something not very frequently and it's complex, we probably really can't make a habit out of it. But if it's complex but we do it extremely frequently, then it's just simply going to take longer to form that habit. These habits do play a significant role in our daily life. They influence our behavior, from simple routines to complex decision making. And understanding habits can be crucial as we seek to adopt perhaps positive behaviors or to break undesirable patterns. So the habit formation process is influenced by principles such as what's called operant conditioning and reinforcement, also known as instrumental conditioning. And this is a type of learning in psychology that involves the modification of behavior through consequences. So reinforcement is the key concept in operant conditioning and refers to the process of strengthening a behavior by increasing the likelihood that we're going to repeat it. Typically, this is done through a reward or by removing an aversive stimulus. And this is known as the very familiar positive or negative reinforcement. So an example of positive reinforcement might be an individual that is regularly completing, say, a cardio workout. That's the behavior. They do experience some positive outcomes. They see their weight decrease, or they're feeling well, and they're achieving their fitness goals, and that's going to be the desirable, the stimulus that we desire. The positive reinforcement, so we see the effectiveness of that workout, that's going to serve as the positive reinforcement that's going to encourage the person to repeat that activity. And of course, done regularly, it becomes less and less effortful and more likely to become an exercise routine in the form of a habit. An example of negative reinforcement would be, say, an individual that consistently uses an umbrella when it rains. Now, using the umbrella, that is the behavior, and they are avoiding getting soaked, and that's going to be the aversive stimulus. The removal of the aversive stimuli and getting wet or soaked reinforces the likelihood or the behavior of using the umbrella when it rains, again, the rain being the cue. So this behavioral reinforcement will increase the likelihood of repeating this behavior. And by the way, you're likely to use an umbrella when it's raining, and no one has to tell you to. You don't have to think about it very, very much. You just simply are quite happy to use the umbrella because you don't want to get wet. And that's a great example of negative reinforcement. Once a behavior becomes habitual, it is typically performed with minimal cognitive effort or conscious awareness. Habits can be both positive or negative, and they play a significant role in the shaping of our daily life and overall well-being. Now, understanding habitual behavior is important as it allows us to mindfully consider aspects of our lives such as personal development, mental health, and the formation of our lifestyle patterns that we want to adopt. Interventions aimed at changing habits in our lives usually involve strategies that center around modifying our cues or our routines or the rewards that we associate with these behaviors. Habits do play a significant role in our everyday lives, of course, and so very often they influence our behaviors and actions without us even consciously being aware of them. Regardless of our mindfulness of them, habits contribute to the efficiency and automaticity of our daily routines despite the benefit or the harm or the cost that's associated with these behaviors. Some key aspects of the role of habits play in our lives include the following. Habits allow us to perform routine tasks with minimal conscious effort, and once a behavior becomes a habit, then the brain is able to automate that process, and that frees up cognitive resources for other tasks. Habits also contribute to the consistency of our actions, and they provide a stable framework for our daily lives, helping us to navigate familiar situations without having to make numerous decisions. And we should keep in mind that consistent behavior will lead to some outcome. And that's regardless of whether that outcome is good or bad. If it's consistent, if we're doing a behavior consistently, we're going to have an outcome. Habits also, if they're maintained over long term, they will contribute to the formation of our lifestyle patterns. Our habits, whether related to diet or exercise, work routines, or even study or skill development, they will shape our overall way of living and will have a significant impact on our health and our well-being. And finally, habits also influence decision-making by creating automatic responses to specific cues or situations that we encounter. This automaticity often leads to mindless decision-making that most likely is not goal congruent. So habits are very often referred to as negative or bad habits. So if we say my habits, we're usually talking in a negative connotation. So one of the primary objectives of this program particularly is to design effective goal-congruent habits that supercharge your life outcomes. So keep that in mind and get excited about it. And just, again, look at habits in a different way. We're going to become more mindful and aware of them, and we're going to do it purposefully so that we can actually produce very, very desirable life outcomes using habits. Rather than use an example or a story this time, I've decided to go ahead and give you a quote. This is a very, very profound quote, one of my favorites, and it's probably worthy of hanging on your mirror to see every day of your life. And it goes like this. Most of the time, what we do is what we do most of the time. Sometimes we do something different. And that was by Townsend and Beaver in a book they wrote on sentence comprehension, but it did have to do with habitual behavior. And I think that sums up this lesson so very well. And again, I think this is just one of those quotes that it really is beneficial to look at and kind of ponder on a very regular basis, because we're going to be doing what we do usually, and we're going to do it over and over and over again. And whatever outcomes that's producing, that's going to be the life that we have to live with. So we're going to do that again most of the time, but sometimes we can do something different, and we're going to do that purposefully using this program. So some key takeaways from today's lesson. Again, just recall, habits are automatic. These are automatic actions. We're going to have some trigger, some cue that we encounter, and that's going to set off some behavior that we have developed. Habitual behavior is acquired through repetition and reinforcement. We can use positive or negative reinforcement. I certainly prefer the positive reinforcement. And as long as we're consistent with it, so it's going to be effortful at first. It will be difficult and challenging and take a little bit of self-discipline and willpower. But it can be established within 18 to 254 days, depending on how complex it is. And then the effort level is going to go almost to zero. So it's worth that effort, but just be aware it's going to take a little bit of time to get it established. And then finally, takeaway number 3, habits exert a profound influence in our daily life, greatly impacting our outcomes. And one way I like to look at this is, is my behavior, is this behavior positive or negative? And I just multiply it by, say, 3,000 or 3,600. And that's the same as basically doing that behavior for 10 years, every single day. and just ask yourself, what's that going to look like if I do this thing for 10 years every day? What's my outcome going to be? And if you like it, then that's a behavior that we should establish as a habit. And if you say, wow, if I did that 3,600 times, that would be terrible, that's something we want to not do, or again, dismantle and not have that as a behavior. So action items this week, I want you to identify 3 habits that you autonomously use on a daily basis. And these habits you recognize have shaped your life as how it is now. So these can be good habits, it can be bad habits, but just recognize, I want you to identify 3 things that you have done over and over again, really without having to use a lot of effort in it, and it has got you where you are today. And then finally, another action item I want us to do. I want us to try using, when we brush our teeth, to floss. And so this is going to be mindfully first. You're going to brush your teeth and you say to yourself, well, I'm brushing my teeth, I'm going to floss. And I recommend those little picks that have the floss built into them. Those are so much easier to use than the stuff you have to wrap around your finger, which seems to take forever. But when you brush your teeth, that's going to be the cue. And when that happens, I want you to floss your teeth. And I don't care if you like it or dislike it. I would like you to do that for the next 3 weeks. And what I want you to notice as you do that, the first few days, it's going to be miserable. You're going to have to, find your floss, and it's going to take an extra minute and all this. And but what I want you to notice, I want you to pay close attention how easy this gets within just a couple weeks. So I want us to do this. I want us to commit to this. I know it's a little bit of an effort, but this is going to be a great example for a good understanding of how we can establish a good habit. So, all right, hope you enjoyed today's lesson, and we'll talk to you next week.